Hello everyone. So in this video there is one topic that I've been reading and I've been researching as well for the last 1 week and I gave a lot of time to that. So I thought it would be really easy for me to make it possible for you to learn, actually to get to know that what happened and why the 9/11 happened and what was the reason behind that 9/11 and that Osama bin Laden attack the twin towers. What was the reason behind that? So the reason was very simple. Okay, first of all, for knowing that why 9/11 happened and why the North Tower and the World Trade Center, why they were the target, the heavy target for the al-Qaeda and the militants of al-Qaeda. What was the reason for that? So the simple reason was we have to go in 80s, right? So right now we are living in 2024, as you all know. But for this story, that why 9/11 happened and why Twin Towers was attacked by the terrorists, what was the reason behind that? So the reason was very simple. In the late 80s, what happened in Afghanistan, there was few organizations that were working countryside, and that time, that was the era for soft cold war era, right? What happened, that was a era, that was a cold war era, right? Which means that cold war era basically was that it was a very high tension between America and USSR, the Soviets. There was always a type of fight between those two countries, because they both wants to dominate the world in everything, whether it's science and technology or armed forces or industries. They wants to dominate, they wants to be the superpower, right? So that was the phase of Cold War era, which happened post World War II. But in the late 80s, after the fall of Berlin Wall, so after the liberation of Germany, what happened, that there was a wall, western side and eastern side. After the fall of Berlin Wall, what happened is that the eastern Germany, which was initially it was under the influence of Soviets lost their influence on that eastern side. Okay, so after that, after the fall of Berlin Wall, it all included in the American side. So it all, the whole Germany was with the America. So that's when the Stalin and Soviets, they started losing their influence the worldwide, because in the Europe there was no any major allies that were standing with Soviets. So in the late 80s, they started circulating worldwide that what are those countries where we can have where we can make our allies and where we can have the control over, so that we will become more powerful. And that's when they started infiltrating and deploying their soldiers, their Soviet soldiers, in Afghanistan. Because at that time Afghanistan was still, it was never a superpower, it was never in the race of superpower, right? But Soviets and Stalin and Soviets, they started realizing that we have to take control, over the other states and over the other countries as well. That's when they started deploying a lot of Soviet soldiers in Afghanistan. And the US saw that, the United States saw that the Soviets are started deploying their lots of tanks and jeeps and trucks and soldiers and everything, they started deploying in Afghanistan. And somewhere they want to take the power of the Afghanistan. So that's when the United States, what they did is that they provided weapons, jeeps, trucks, and so many things to the local militant group, which was working nationwide in Afghanistan, which was Mujahideen, right? So Mujahideen and Taliban, these all were the terrorist organization that were working, that were a local organization, militant organization that was working across the country, to maintain the Islamic regimes and rules. What happened is that these were basically a local militant groups that used to take control over the countryside, that if there is any civilian who is not following the rules and regulation and the Islamic regimes, if they are not following, they used to punish them. So these were like Mujahideen, Taliban, these were like nationwide militant groups. So United States, what they saw is that they saw that the Soviets are becoming more dominant on these local militant groups, because obviously there is an obvious reason, because these militant groups do not have a very a very advanced weapons or guns and artilleries. They don't have any of those things, so they were becoming a kind of weak in front of the Soviets. And that's when the United States, what they did, they did the biggest mistake. What they did is they started providing weapons to Mujahideen and to Taliban, which used to be a militant group, a local militant group. They started providing weapons, RPGs, artilleries, tanks, jeeps, everything, choppers. Like, do you even imagine? The United States provided choppers to the local militant groups so that they can fight against Soviets, and Soviets will not be able to take control over the Afghanistan. So that was the mistake which was done by Soviets, which was done by the United States, that they provided every sort of weapons to the Mujahideen and the militants of Taliban, right? So that they could fight against Soviets. So that was the start. Okay, that was the start, that why the Talibans and the militants of Talibans and Mujahideen, why they got the weapons, from where they got the weapons. It was the United States. That's why there is always a saying worldwide: the United States always makes the biggest mistake. Like, from the, I mean, whether it was dropping the two nuclear weapons on Japan, it was also the biggest mistake because it was a question to the humanity, right? Or whether it was providing the weapons and all sort of help to a militant groups, right? So it was always the United States. Always, United States is always a country which always does something which will going to cost them as well as the other countries as well. So that was the start, from where the Mujahideen and the Taliban, they started getting weapons for the to fight against Soviets. And that's when the Soviets, they started becoming weak as well, because obviously they were not be able to supply that, they were not able to basically cope up with that kind of an attack, because the militants were having every sort of help from the Americans. So that's when the Soviets left the Afghanistan. So after, in the late 80s, like 89, 87, the Soviets, they have left the Afghanistan purely. But that was the time when the Islamic, you can say, a terror organization started forming in Afghanistan by itself, by the incentive that America was interfering a lot in the Middle Eastern countries, in Iraq, right? So what they thought, the Mujahideen and the Taliban, and if I'll tell you why Osama bin Laden attacked the Twin Towers, there is a very interesting story behind that. The story is that after the Soviets left the Afghanistan, the Osama bin Laden, if you don't know, if many of you don't know, he was a very educated person. Like, he was a civil engineer, and he was also coming from a very reputed family. Like, his family was very rich. He was a civil engineer, but still he chose to be something else. So what happened after the Soviets left the Afghanistan? Osama bin Laden came to, he was not in news, he was never in the news, but he started seeing the interference of Americans in the Middle Eastern countries, in the Middle Eastern countries, and their norms and their rules, because there are different norms and rules which are followed by Muslim people and Islamic people. There are certain rules and regulation that they have to follow, and America was interfering in them. So that was the rage which was being filled in the militants, and in all these and to be specific, Osama bin Laden, that was the reason why he started getting rage against Americans. Because now just imagine, United States was the same country which provided weapons and artilleries and everything to Mujahideen, to Taliban, and now after a certain period, the same militants who got their weapon from the America was getting raged against America, because their thinking was that America is a Western country and they are trying to interfere in our Islamic countries, and we can't tolerate that, right? So we have to give some sort of lesson to Osama bin Laden, to Americas, to know the fact that you can't interfere in our Islamic countries and in our rules and in our regulations. You can't do that. This is our regimes, and we have to follow that. So in Osama bin Laden was, he founded Al-Qaeda. So Al-Qaeda was, I don't know how many of you know this thing, but Al-Qaeda was one of the terrorist organization that was built in early 90s. So the aim of Al-Qaeda was basically to protect the people of their community and to give a lesson to those who are trying to interfere in our religious activities, in our religious regimes, right? So that was basically the main aim of Al-Qaeda, right? But in 97, 98, there was a famous interview which was given by Osama bin Laden to some sort of CNN. I think it was a CNN interviewer, and it was a very interesting story. That interviewer of the CNN, he went to met him in a cave in some, so it is a very isolated cave in the valleys of Afghanistan, and he went to met him. And he, Osama bin Laden, what he did, that he met him and he declared jihad against America. So because America was interfering a lot in this, in the Islamic regimes and Islamic countries and their rules, so that's when Osama bin Laden, the founder of al-Qaeda, he declared jihad against America, that we will do war, or we will do some sort of attack on the American soil, because we can't take this thing and anywhere, because America has always been interfering in Iraq, Iran. There has always been a lot of involvement of America in the Middle Eastern countries, that is for sure, and you all know that, many of the people, know that, right? I hope I was able to make you understand that why this attack happened on the American soil, because Osama bin Laden, he was pissed off by the American interference in the Islamic countries and in the Islamic regimes, and he didn't like it to be, to be get interfered by someone is not from the same religion. So that's the thing that pissed him off. And after 98, he declared jihad against America, and after in 2001 was the time when he and the militants and everyone from basically that terrorist organization declared to attack on the American soil. And that's when 9/11 was happened on the American soil, and there were, I think, three, there were 12 hijackers who basically hijacked these passengers flights, and one of them is a very famous name. I don't know how many of you, his name was Muhammad Atta. He was basically a pilot of one of the planes which hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And after that, there was a uh, global it was a global news, because America at that time used to be a superpower, and for them to not protect their own citizens and more than 3,000 lives have gone, it was the time for the America to take, to take the to take actions basically against those who have done this kind of heinous crime, taking 3,000 lives. Okay, so that was the time, that was the reason, heavily, that was the reason why the 9/11 attack happened on the American soils. And after that, 9/11, George Bush, who was the president of America back then, at the time, when the time, the 9/11 happened, he was completely panicked. His government was in panic, so he took some decisions, and that decisions were that they started they started deployment of heavy soldiers in the Afghanistan valleys, Kandahar district of Afghanistan, Kabul district of Afghanistan. They started heavy deployment because they wanted to take revenge, and they wanted to know that who was that, who did an attack on the American soil. So that was the reason why 9/11 happened, and why, Osama bin Laden, why he was so pissed off by the Americans, that he decided to attack the American soil, and 3,000 people lost their life. It was a very tragic incident. I was not even born that time, but I was watching this series, and I was very influenced by that, and I'm like, I have to make this. I don't know how many Indians are really aware from this kind of knowledge or this kind of fact. So I tried to explain it, and I hope you like it. And thank you so much for giving your 12 and 15 minutes. And I hope I was able to make some sort of impact and was able to give you a very small value. Obviously, with 15 minutes, I can't give you a very huge value, but I'm really happy that I was able to give you 15 minutes of value. And thank you so much for listening to me. And if you like it, you can share, and please, if you have any kind of reviews for me, you can, the comment section is open for you. You can comment whatever you want. I'm always ready to take the criticism. I'm always there for that. So thank you so much for listening and giving your time. Thank you so much. Bye.